Hey, Chase on the range with Enforce. Today, we're going to look at firearm safety rules, fundamentals of marksmanship, some shooting, and maintenance. Remember, if you've decided to own a firearm, then training and safety is paramount. So we're going to start off with the 5 basic firearm safety rules. First one is treat every weapon as if it were loaded. So keeping that in mind at all times will always maintain that you don't orient the weapon in any way that's not responsible. Next, it's going to be keep your weapon on safe until you're ready to fire. So basically what that means is until you've committed mentally and you know you have a good reason to fire, your weapon's going to stay on safe. When that time comes, you're up on target, you got a good sight picture, and the weapon comes off safe and you commit to firing. Next is keep your finger straight off the trigger, just like you have it now, until you intend to fire. Again, that's another redundant level of safety to making sure that your weapon is not discharged until you intend it to be so. After that is going to be know your target, what lies beyond it. The reason I include this is because depending on what you're shooting at, paper, steel, any other kind of medium, bullets, one, do weird things when they hit stuff, and also, you know, that you could have unintentional pass-throughs. If you're not shooting into a berm, you're shooting in an unorthodox position or a location, something like that. So just understanding that, you know, the bullet has energy, it's going to continue on until it hits a hard surface that defeats it. So just always keeping in mind what you're shooting at is also very, very important. So Collins, as a first-time firearms owner, I really appreciate that you're out here seeking training and looking to be more responsible with your firearm. That's absolutely awesome. One of the things that I learned in the Marine Corps that I really, really appreciate is the seriousness of weapon systems and what they can do, you know, when used intentionally or even unintentionally. Safety is absolutely paramount. The consequences of reckless use is a very serious thing. So we're going to focus on safety and fundamentals today of shooting. So we just went over the basic firearm safety rules, and now we're going to move into basic weapons handling. So again, you've got a good high grip on your firearm. You're always going to want to maintain that, whether it's a rifle or pistol. You've got your finger straight off the trigger. That's fantastic. The next thing we're going to go into is just basic body positioning. So if you'll go ahead and you'll face right down there. Did you ever do any martial arts or boxing, anything like that?
Yes, I did do Krav.
Oh, you did Krav, all right. So what most people will refer to as a basic fighting stance. All you're looking for is even weight distribution, and generally speaking, we're gonna look to face our feet towards what we're shooting. The reason we do this is because we are predators, right? We have eyes in the front of our head, and so you don't wanna fight what your body naturally wants to do. And when you are having a body alarm response, basically your body's responding to some sort of danger, then you're gonna face it naturally anyway. So don't fight that in yourself, right? We're gonna train to that. We're going to use those natural body responses to our advantage. So again, you got a good, nice stance. You're going to be evenly balanced, and its feet basically a little bit more than shoulder width apart, knees slightly bent. And again, the reason you don't want to lock your knees out is because if you watch a person or really any other animal, when it goes to move, the first thing it does is it loads its legs, and we do that by bending our knees. So you'll be a little bit faster and a little bit more agile by always maintaining that bend in your knees. Secondly, that's going to help with your biomechanics, or basically the way that your body is going to mitigate the recoil of the rifle, the impulse as the rifle comes to the rear when you're shooting it. And having that little bend in your knees will help you stabilize that more and be able to have faster and more accurate follow-up shots, which again goes back to responsible shooting, because remember, every bullet comes with a little lawyer, and you're responsible for every round you send down range. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to fit the rifle to your body. So if you would, go ahead and come up, bring the rifle up on target. If you would, pop up that rear sight. Now, what you do, go ahead and aim in. All right, so we're just going to start with basic adjustments, right? So first, if you'll notice, you got a lot of weight out here right now, all right? So the further that you are able to get your hand out here, the less weight you're trying to control, the less weight you have ahead of your hand. The next thing you'll notice is the way you're gripping the rifle right now, you're supporting it, but you're not necessarily controlling it. So if you roll your wrist slightly around, that's right, and put your thumb right on top, we refer to this basically as like a C-clamp. And you're essentially grabbing the rifle like this. So not only does that have less weight in front of your hand, but it lets you manipulate the rifle back and forth much more controllably. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to fit the stock to you. Now you're a pretty big dude, you got pretty long arms, so I think a full extension is probably going to work for you just fine. But if in shooting it feels like you're a little bit farther away from your sights, it feels a little uncomfortable, then we can adjust it in. And that's something you can play with. The final thing I'm going to recommend that you do right now is you're going to actually open up this rear sight. And what that does, if I can do this, there we go. That gives you a wider sight aperture in the rear, and that's going to let you more quickly pick up the front sight. So because you're not using a red dot, that's going to let you have more light through there and acquire the sight more quickly. Now the last thing I want you to try to do is go ahead, pick a point down there, aim in, you can do that now, and then open both eyes. Now I want you to maintain that front sight focus. This needs to be completely crystal clear. What you're aiming at should be fuzzy and the rear sight should be fuzzy. Does that seem like that's right for you? Okay, now this is where we start working on fitting the rifle to your body. You can go ahead and adjust the stock in or out and see if that messes with your sight picture at all. Now that looks almost like you're more cramped. Do you feel a little bit more tense and cramped?
Absolutely.
So we don't want that. What we want to do is maintain as a relaxed posture as possible. And I'll show you what I mean. So right now, if you look at yourself, you'll notice that you're kind of hunched over. And what that does, it puts a lot of tension in your head and neck, and it makes it very hard to maintain control of the weapon over long periods of time, especially, for instance, if you're using this like a home defense situation where you may have to hold a position for a long period of time. So the way you get around that tension is by standing up straight naturally, getting in a normal sort of feet forward position, again, knees bent, feet slightly wider than shoulder width apart, and without bringing your head down to the rifle, bring the rifle up to your eye. And if you notice, yeah, exactly. Now this is where we start playing with your stock position. Most people think they need to bury the stock down in their shoulder. It's not necessarily true. This isn't a huge amount of recoil. Yeah. What you need to do basically is find that position in and outside of your chest. You sort of move the stock back and forth, up and down, where you feel that you can lean in slightly and not get all rolled over. And the way you can help yourself do that is actually leaning forward at the waist and not at the shoulder. So if you watch my midriff here, if I have my shoulders up, the way I'm gonna put more body behind the gun is by actually leaning in like this. You'll see I'm bending my front leg and I can lean into the recoil, but I'm not bending my shoulders and spine too much. They come up a little, but they don't have to roll all the way over. And that will let you really maintain that good shooting position over a longer period of time. Now again, watch that trigger discipline. Make sure you're keeping that finger straight off the trigger. Lot to keep in mind. We're just going through it nice and slow. There you go. So that's looking pretty good. And this is what we'll go and we'll practice over and over and over again when we get on the range. We just call them basic up drills. So you're going to start in a very relaxed position, and you'll assume a natural shooting position, fire off one round. And what you're going to want to do then is you're going to be thinking about tracking your sights. Did I get a good sight picture? How is my trigger press? Did I get a hit? And how does my body feel before the shot? How does it feel after the shot? Did I move? And these are all the things you start doing, and you're just running through that list over and over again as you're training on the range every time. Eventually, it becomes subconscious. All right, Colin, so we're gonna just go over the basic maintenance and lubing procedures for your firearm here. So as you can see right now, we've got the dust cover open, the bolt is forward, and the firearm is on safe. So in order to understand the basic function of this rifle, we're just gonna go ahead and take it apart. Start by pushing this pin here in the rear. Just push it through, pull it with your finger, and it'll hinge open. And then you can grab the charging handle here. It's got a little latch, and you just pull that, and the whole system will come out. So your bolt carrier group and your charging handle will both come out. So you can lube these weapons a lot, and they'll run just fine. There's endless debates on the internet of how much lube you should use. I've never experienced a time when you can over lube these unless you're in an incredibly dusty environment, which most places in the States are not. So you don't have to really worry about it. Go ahead and you want to run these things pretty wet, and they'll be very, very reliable. So starting off with most trigger groups, this is your trigger group here in the lower receiver. They're going to come with a pretty thick lubricant, so unless this rifle is really used, you don't need to mess with that or put any lube there. The other wear points that you're going to want to hit are on the bolt carrier group, so we can look at that here. So this is your bolt carrier group, and it's comprised of the bolt carrier itself and the bolt, and then the cam pin and the firing pin. Now we don't need to take this apart to lube it, and there's just a couple of spots that you want to apply lubricant to that. Just about any lubricant will do. Again, if you want to waste many, many hours on the internet, you can argue with people about what's the best. Honestly, pretty much they all work, unless you're shooting a huge amount of ammunition, which most people don't do. So you got these little gas ports right there where gas comes out, so you don't want to drop lube in there. Not that it necessarily matters. Gas will drive through that, but it's not a big deal. Basically, you want to apply a little bit of lube down here where the cam pin is, and just a couple of drops in there. You can push it in, so you can get a little bit more there. Most people are going to say they're going to recommend not lubing the bolt face because that's where the actual case of the round sits. But you can drop just a little bit again around there and work it in. Typically, I'll put a little bit of lubricant on each side of the bolt carrier just because it does interface with the inside of the receiver here, and kind of just rub it down. You don't necessarily have to do that, but you'll find it typically runs a little bit smoother, and you can hear it when you're actually cycling the weapon. You can hear that grinding metal on metal thing. When you get lube in the right spots, that'll pretty much go away. Another thing you can do is, just with the extra lubricant you have on your hands, put a little bit here on the charging handle. Again, that runs in this top little trough here in the top of the receiver. And again, just a little bit where aluminum on aluminum goes, it helps. And you'll notice the more you use this, the finish will start to wear on a couple of spots. Not a big deal at all. The other thing that you can do if you'd like, and we don't necessarily need to do it today, but if you say, for instance, you've been shooting the gun a lot and you haven't had a chance to clean it, one of the things you can do is apply a little bit of lubricant here to each of the tracks on the inside of the upper receiver. And again, you're really just thinking about how this fits in here and how it interfaces with the gun, wear spots, and you know, you can put lube in there. Again, for today, we're not going to be doing a ton of shooting, so that'll be plenty of lubricant. So we'll leave that apart for right now, and we're going to get into the recoil system. So this is your buffer, and there's a big spring in here. So in order to take that out, all you do is you push this little plunger here, and you want to push in on the buffer with your thumb, depress the plunger down, and then let the buffer sort of ride over. It's a little bit hard to do, you'll get the trick of it. Pull that out. So this is your buffer and buffer spring. Essentially all that's happening is when you fire the gun, the bolt actually unlocks, comes back, this smacks into the buffer, and that delays it, so you actually hear in here a little weight. So the weight's forward, this smacks it, the weight goes to the rear, again delaying the travel slightly, and then this will continue on to the rear. That's why there's this rubber piece here, just in case it impacts the rear of the receiver extension tube or buffer tube. And that just sits in here. So this whole thing compresses and then pushes the entire bolt carrier back forward, picks up another round out of the magazine, and rechambers. So one thing I'll do is I'll actually take a little bit of this gun grease. This is Tetra gun grease. Again, it doesn't matter. Like we said before, lithium grease works really well. And I will actually go ahead, open up this rag, lay this down, and I'll put a little bit of grease all along the spring. And what that does, again, it doesn't really matter how much, but you'll just notice that it really helps smooth out that cycle of operations you know, with your entire recoil system. It makes the whole thing smoother. Again, the idea here is where metal is rubbing on metal, you just put a little bit of lubricant. In order to reinstall this, again, you just push the spring back in there, and then you're just gonna give a good hard press with your thumb to overcome that plunger, and it's locked in. In order to put the bolt carrier back in, you'll notice the bolt is to the rear right now. With one hand, you can just give it a flick. It's one way to make sure your gun is functioning properly as well. The bolt has to be forward in order to lock into these lugs to lock into the chamber. Then we'll take the charging handle. Again, you're going to stick it into this recess, and you push in and up until it slips up. And you sort of work in there and feel it going up, and push that forward like that, not all the way in. And then the gas key right here, which will interface with the gas tube, which is this actual silver piece of metal you can see running back in here. That's where the gas comes out of the barrel. It's tapped off right there, it comes back through the gas tube, interfaces with the gas key, and actually vents out of those two holes right there, which is how the force of recoil and the actual gas coming out is kept in a linear fashion. That's one of the nice things about these guns is recoil is, that's one of the nice things about these guns is recoil is completely linear within the AR platform. So again, you're gonna have that gas key, you're gonna interface in a little slot in the charging handle. So it's gonna come up in there, whole thing sits there, done. Go ahead and fold it back in, make sure the pin's out so it'll close. So that it locks in entirely, and then the pin, push it in, and you're good. So now that your firearm's back together, we're gonna go through the basic functions check. So essentially what we wanna do is we wanna run the charging handle with the weapon on safe, pointing it in a safe direction. That has cocked the hammer, and it should be in a state ready to fire, assuming the safety is working. However, when you pull the trigger, it will not. So you pull the trigger, it does not fire. Go ahead and put the weapon on fire, pull the trigger, hammer falls. Keep the trigger depressed to the rear, use the charging handle to cycle the bolt again. That has reset the trigger, and now you're going in the hammer, and you're going to release the trigger. You'll hear that click. That is the sear re-engaging, and now it should be ready to fire again. You're going to again pull the trigger, hammer falls, that's good. So now you're going to release the trigger, cycle the weapon one more time, put it back on safe, and one more time attempt to pull the trigger, and it should not fire, and it didn't. Fantastic. Then you just go ahead and close the dust cover there to keep extra debris and dust out of your operating system. And that's it, that's a basic function check.